everybody, this is James Diboe in the Scubbling, dedicated to original peoples as always, and we got a new season, a special edition, and we're going to be dealing with different places around the world, my personal experience, my own research, and a whole lot more. One of the main key topics is something that always stuck with me anytime I've traveled anywhere, and plus based on research also, something called colorism, because I'm finding this place, a lot of places around the world, it's like almost like a caste system around the planet to a degree, and how people are treated. So I want to start off with, we're going to deal with things in continents. That's the way I'm going to deal with things. So I'm starting off with Africa now. You know, part one is Africa. And I'm going to deal with the list of countries in the order that I went to in Africa. So I first went to the north of Africa first, was Morocco. Now in Morocco, yes, there's a lot of history I did before I was aware of the original Black Berbers being there. And also there was times of the Moors being there. Now I'm aware of Europeans from the earliest time, not earliest time, like later times during like the Roman period, and also time before that where the Berbers became mixed with the sea peoples around 1200 BC that came in. So there's always been invasions into North Africa for a long time. But the original North Africans were Black peoples, just like the Egyptians, the Libyans, the Algerians, and the Tunisians. So in Morocco, when I'm focused on colorism, I'm noticing that the darker are like, basically, you can see people prefer the lighter complex. And I also look at how African people are treated in these countries. So when you see Africans coming from different parts of Africa, doesn't matter what part, especially Black Africa, they're treated like the lowest of the low. So basically you can see a disconnection, not a connection, with the people who are living in North Africa now, Morocco in particular, we're on the topic of, and Sub-Saharan Africa, which is considered as Black Africa. Now, this is something that's been going on for a long time with all these different invasions. Many invasions into North Africa. Obviously later West Africa, East Africa, South Africa got invaded. But these are early times. So when we're dealing with these early times, we're looking at like the original Black people who we know as the Berbers. Now we see a lot of these pale Berbers there who are invaders. They're non-indigenous to the land. Any part of Africa they're non-indigenous to. So before like times of like 1500 BC, these times you wouldn't find any heavily strong influence or gene pool of these pale people coming into Africa. They came as invaders, some came as traders, and some intermarried, you know, so. But I found Moroccan people, they're quite cool people, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's where we're coming from. Like when you're born in the UK, born in America, born in a Western society, people might treat you a little bit better anyway than the born African peoples. So these things I always clock onto, where some people might just go there and you just base things on how they treated you. Now, they see money when you're coming from the UK, coming from America, any Western part of the world. So for me, I've got my third eye open on how are they treating our fellow Africans, our ancestors, and they treat them real bad. And the colorism thing of like people preferring lighter skin, this is something that I see everywhere, you know what I'm saying? And we also got to look at different periods of times and where did all these times change as well? You know, we've had so many invaders. You know, you got even people from the times of the Moors, before even the Moors were going into Spain. You had people like Visigoths, these types of peoples who were in Spain, and they were invaders to these lands, and they were coming in. You had the Roman Empire. You know, you had Greeks up in North Africa, you know, you had the Hyksos, you had the Sea Peoples, many different invaders, Persians, all bringing in pale skin, basically. So Africa, I'm hoping that in the future that Africa will become back to its original self. And that's the only way I believe Africa is going to be thriving again, because there's too much divide with the different races, ethnicities, and cultures. So Morocco definitely, it's a nice place. And at the end of the day, they've got a lot of interesting history, very interesting history. Now, when we deal with the Moors now, where did the Moors come from? You hear many different topics on the Moors. Sometimes you hear things like the Moors came from Arabia. Then we, according to people like Dr. John Andrew Clark, the Moors came from Senegambia. And then some people say Mauritania and Morocco. And then there's also Mfadishi. He claimed that the Moors came from Kush, which is what we call Ethiopia. So we hear different versions of history from different people. And some are not valid and some are more valid than others. But I like to study all of them. Now, one thing that I know is that at the times when the Moors were going into Spain, the majority of the army were African people. Tariq, he was an African. Now, there were thousands of Africans going in, thousands, maybe 8,000, maybe more. There was different times, different Africans were going in there anyway. So there was only about 300 Arabs that went there, because some people will say the Moors were Arabs, which the majority was not. There was a very small, tiny number of Arabs going in there. There were so many Berbers, but the strong might hold was the Africans that came from places like Senegambia. So as times went on now, the Moors who came in, and basically they introduced and reintroduced also, but there was a time when the Greeks learnt off the Egyptians, the Romans, they learnt off the Greeks. So a lot of their history got lost. So the Moors were able to bring the history back of what the Egyptian text said, and also what was going on in places like Greece and elsewhere. Brought science, mathematics. They brought so much benefits, medicines, there were doctors, and also female Moorish doctors as well, because females get left out a lot. There was also baths that they were introducing to. And Europe started, especially Spain, it was thriving through the Africans, especially. Now, down the line, yes, there was a time they also went into southern France, and they got defeated at the same time, and they were pushed out. But you still see them mixing some of these in the French of African mixed, some of them. Portugal, especially, even though they might have become independent from the Moors very early. And also the people who were the Jews there, they took a lot of knowledge off the Africans. So everyone was benefiting, basically. And even the first universities introduced, they didn't have nothing like universities. Europe was in dark ages, and they were suffering real bad from all sorts of diseases. It was practically a famine. And it was just, the people called Visigoths and Vandals, they were just like savages. Look at the name Vandals. It says it all, doesn't it? Destroy everything. Now, what I get out of things now is this divide between North Africa and what they say sub-Saharan Africa. Now, the whole point why they do it is because they want you to believe that North Africa was never a black place. That's why they say sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa. North Africa, the whole of Africa was black people, simple as that. Now, when we see black peoples, right, this is because we're English speaking and it's what we're taught as the word black. The word Moor means someone real dark-skinned, scorched. You can use the term black. Now, the word Moors as well, that's where the name Morocco come from, the name Mauritania, these kind of names. So later on, they used the word, they wanted to distinguish the people who were Arabs or mulatto from the black peoples of Africans. So they started using the term blackamoor to describe black people, what we call today. And they used the word Moors to describe Arab, Turkish type of mulatto, different peoples and that. So then after that, this is when the times when the Moors got expelled from Spain, they basically, the racism started pouring in more, especially in Europe. Europe started becoming really a racist place until they started to colonize different parts of Africa. They started the slave trade, then started colonialism, and racism was the new thing that was thriving in Europe. All the benefit from what the Africans brought in. Now, these are not the first times Africans went into Europe. We can go back further, the Carthaginians, and even go back further than that. So even though we might have had times when Hannibal went in, and he was coming from Tunisia, places like that, but at the same time, there was Black people always going into that Mediterranean area, all the time. There's much evidence, there's artifacts, there's skeletal remains, there's DNA that's been in these places. Matter of fact, to get even deeper, when you're dealing with places like Crete, because I've been to Crete. Now, Crete, geographically, is an African island, Crete. Now, just because it's been colonized and it's classed as part of Greece, it doesn't. This is what the conqueror does. He takes lands, takes different places, and claims it as his own, as always. So, when I look at Crete, I was looking at the Minoan civilization. You can clearly see these are dark-skinned people. So I spoke to a lot of the people in Crete also about why are the depictions of the Minoan people, Black people? A lot of them are in denial, especially they have a worry when they feel like you know what you're talking about also. So I always press people for information. When they give me what they know, if they try and do it in a way because of their racist ways, then that's when I come on, I step on the gas then. And I'll press them for information. I'll ask them, well, why this and why that? And they start getting worried. So then sometimes, because remember also, before I even did the podcast anyway, I was interviewing people in different parts of the world anyway. So I know how to ask the right questions. This is so important. It doesn't matter if I've got a guest coming on my show. I've been doing interviews with people for a very long time in different parts of the world. I know the right questions you ask and you get the right answers. So I have to speak to a lot of different peoples. I did go some of the different places in Crete. So I'm trying to find any evidence of, Black peoples. The Minoans was the strongest evidence I could find. And a lot of people had a problem with that. So back to Morocco anyway. Speaking to some Moroccan people, they try to deal with it. Now, it depends on the Moroccan. We can't judge them all. Very few that I've met were very aware of calling themselves Africans. There was a lot of them who consider themselves as either Arabs, or they would make out like the Berbers were always light people. And these people who were dark-skinned Moroccans were slaves brought in from like West Africa and these places. Now, there was times where there were slaves brought into these places from West Africa. And this is the time of, obviously, religions are coming into these places. Now, nothing wrong with religion, but it always seems that where there's religion, slavery is not far behind. This is because a lot of people use these religions politically rather than spiritually. Now, this has always been the problem. If you practice something spiritually, that's all good, but don't practice it politically. The Africans have had their spirituality a long time, a very, very long time before anyone on this planet. We took our spirituality around the world. So that's for facts. Now, moving into places like Gambia now, because Gambia, like we were talking about Senegambia, the Moors come from these places. Now, Gambia was a lovely place I've been to, Mandi people. And the Mandinkas, they are not just only concentrated in Gambia, they're in other places, surrounding areas of those West African regions. Now, the Mandi language, that's tied into Niger-Congo, Proto-Bantu. So Bantu, Niger-Congo, and the Mandi have common links in their linguistics and shared blood ties as well. So the Malian Empire, the Songhai Empire, Gambia would have been a part of that. So what was so interesting now, anyway, because as a youth, like I say, I just watch Roots, and it's all the destruction, all the pain, and basically a foot on our neck. We don't get a say. So when I started looking at all these civilizations in Africa, visiting Gambia, and I did go and see the Roots tour, Kunta Kinte, getting very angry. Then a man named Laman, who was the guide, he was explaining the history. He also explained that, it's not all about the negativity from Africans being enslaved. We have a long history before that, a much longer history before that, a thriving history, part of many empires, many civilizations. So the experience that I got in Gambia was really better than Morocco. It was more like I felt really at home in Gambia. I felt at home. And even though I'm Nigerian and connected to the Ijaw tribe of Nigerian Delta State, and still I find that Gambia, they are my brothers, basically. But I can't really say the same about Morocco. So Gambia, the experience there was good, meeting the peoples, getting to visit the homes, getting to mix with the local people, and there was no discomfort at all. And I noticed that they like reggae music out there. I've seen a lot of Rastas out there. And I just thought it was just such a great place. And Gambia seems like a very easy place, especially if you've never been to what they call sub-Saharan Africa. So when I really dived into sub-Saharan Africa, that I found Gambia very easy going, and I started forming ideas out there, especially like where I was thinking about, imagine like buying land out in Gambia, land would be very cheap, and also to pay your builders to build them, it's going to be a lot more cheaper. And we look at when you get a mortgage over in the UK or any Western world, it's like you're in debt forever. We're buying your land and building on it and having your home in the motherland. This is like a dream for me eventually, because yeah, it's nice to own property wherever you live, but it's what you're getting for your money and how big your land is and how big you can make your house. And I just compared the difference in prices basically, and I realized how much the UK is a robbery. This is when I started to realize that we must connect more to our peoples in Africa, and it's all about effort. And we are here to exchange knowledge with our brothers out in the motherland. And the great conversations I was having with some peoples there. There's a guy called Chief Janner who I spoke to. Now, this went I was first visiting Banjo Beach. So when I met some peoples out there who took me maybe like 2-hour drive, and I was going to stay in meet a friend's home, basically, friend of the family's home. And I noticed that the property was amazing that they had. And I've never seen so much land like that. They were growing moringa leaves on the trees, and they were growing all sorts of vegetables. And the moringa, I was drinking the moringa, and it was like, wow, I felt like it was giving me life, Also, eating with these peoples now, where it's not just about having your own plate, you all sit around, eating together. And I remember going to the fish market, and we bought these barracudas. And what was so great about it is he said, pick your fish. And I remember just looking inside the giant freezer, and he just opened it up and he said, just pick your fish. So I picked like a bunch of barracudas. Then we went to the vegetable store close by, and Scotch bonnets, like, I've never seen Scotch bonnets so big and so amazing, not like the ones we have here. So we're just cooking up, and I'm getting quite hungry in the house. And this is where I learned, when Africans are cooking, don't expect your food just to be ready in just 1 hour or something. They were cooking this food for maybe 3.5 hours. So I'm getting hungry now. I'm thinking, why are they taking so long? But then when they brought it out, it was the most tastiest food ever. It's not about rushing your food. Make sure your food is cooked properly, and it's cooked. It's not ready until it's ready, basically. So meeting a man called Chief Janet down in these areas, because I was getting introduced to different people, like the medicine man. Medicine man. He's healed a lot of people for 40 years. And I was having great discussions. He was telling me that not just people from Africa have came to see him, even people from Europe who've came with different kind of diseases. He's been a healer. Then also, now Chief Janet, this is a very important why they introduced me to Chief Janet. Basically, if you ever decided to live in this part of Gambia, or even just me being there at that particular time, if you ever have any problems, he's the man that you call. I took the phone number, got some pictures with him, had great discussions with him. And he's seen that, like, you know, I'm a really proud African myself, and they pick up on these vibes, how proud you are. So it makes them more connect to you, just like I connect to them. And Chief Janet, you know, he was a great chief. I don't know if he's still around now, but if I ever go back to Gambia, I will look out for them. And if you ever have any problems, example, like, I don't know, with localers or maybe corrupt police, or, you know, you get these things anywhere, it would be the man that, you know, we give him that phone call and he'll definitely be able to help us out. So it's always good to know chiefs, you know, it's good to know certain types of people when you're traveling somewhere. I mean, as far as going in, because remember, when you're going out the tourist area, you're dealing with different territories now. We went into the villages. We noticed that things are completely different in villages. We noticed that even a lot of the youth, anyway, yeah, a lot of the youth weren't, no one was really begging, basically. That's what I thought interesting. No one was really asking for anything. You know, you can feel free to give if you want to give. If you don't give, you don't give. But, you know, I noticed that in the tourist area in Banjul Beach, around these areas, a lot of people will ask for things or they're trying to sell things. But that's anywhere. You come to the tourist area and people are there to try and benefit, aren't they? You know, nothing wrong with that. But then I wanted to see the real Gambia. So I remember going around the villages, and I was meeting so many different Africans, and we were so happy. And it was just like that deep spiritual connection what I had with them. Now, even though Gambia is a Muslim country, it's not like loud with it. And at the same time, even though they might be Muslims, they still carry their true African traditions, which I liked, and that's the main thing why I'm there, to connect with the Africans, you know. So it was just a beautiful feeling, you know, Gambia. And that's definitely a place I will go back to. Definitely want to go back to Gambia at some point. And I really miss the place. Yeah, I'd advise most people, you know, if you're going to go Africa, definitely Gambia's got to be up there on the list. So that was Gambia anyway, and definitely, you know, it's got great memories, and I remember some great people I met out there, and people who I can still keep in touch with, you know, so that's great. Now, another place now that I went to, one of the fair places, would have been Kenya. Kenya, going on East Africa now. What I found with Kenya was really amazing. Now, how I dealt with it, Kenya, yeah, it was, I remember first going on a safari now. Now, the man who took us on a safari, he said his name was Daniel, but that's the name to give to the tourist. It wasn't his African name. So we're building up a relationship. I still actually keep in touch with him. He's an independent safari tourer. So it was great to give my money to the Africans of these places rather than deal with these tour operators where these Europeans or whoever else is going to benefit. And so he took us there on a VIP. Now, when we say VIP, that just basically means that in the safari GP taking you in, it'll just be you and your people. It won't be other people there who are, you know, and I preferred it that way. It was a long drive to get this safari. Now, in the safari, you got to see some, you know, different wildlife, and I'll be seeing red elephants. You tell me red elephants. I was saying, why are they red? And he go, because they roll in the red sand, like the mud type, so the color red. It was like, wow. And some of these elephants now, they can block your path when you're driving. So when you're driving you're just trying to move around. They could be in the road area for like maybe 20 minutes. And you're like, well, can't be driving. You see, no, don't even move while the elephant's there. You know what I'm saying? So getting a bit impatient in that, but they're going to move when they're going to move. This is nature. Them beeping the horns don't work. So once they move, then we could drive past them. So this is starting our safari off. So we goes and sees now things like jackals. I've never seen a jackal. Also seen wild dogs. Remember seeing zebras, gazelles, wildebeest. Now I was hoping that we're going to see lions and cheetahs and that, but we didn't get to see them, unfortunately. Now I remember they picked us up at 6 a.m. because what happened basically is they take you back to the lodge you're staying in, and then you stay for so many hours. Then they'll come pick you up, after you've had something to eat and that. So I remember in the lodge now getting picked up. He picks up at 6 a.m. We're driving now, and he says that we missed a cheetah or a leopard was one of them, yeah. And I said, how do you know? So he's studying the footprint of the cheetah or the leopard that was there. Now he's like an expert at his job, so I wouldn't pick up on these things, but he was, and he was not just only staring at saying there was a leopard here. He said the footprint is very fresh. Basically, it could have been minutes before, or an hour, or something like that. So I was amazed by his expertise, and this is a person I would recommend him to anybody. So the safari was great. Now, while we're in this area safari, I'm aware that the Maasai tribes are not too far. So I've asked them to take us to the Maasai tribes, only a 15-minute drive, which made things a lot easier. So now we're driving towards to meet these Maasai peoples. So I asked him, what is your tribe? Are you related to these Maasais who are Nilo-Saharan? He says, no. He told me he's a Bantu. So I didn't know what he meant by Bantu at the time. So we explained that the Bantus came from West Africa, and this is where I started getting my studies of the Bantu and understanding it from different perspectives. So now, when we get to meet the Maasai people, I started asking them questions, and I made a deep connection with them. And they can see when you have a little knowledge yourself that the conversation is going to go further. So I'm giving them little interviews. I'm saying to them, so do you believe in God? And the reason why I'm asking these questions is because we've had people dictate to us about what we believed and what we didn't believe. So I want to speak to indigenous Africans on what did they believe. So the migration of into Kenya, for example, according to research, they say the Khoisan were there first. Then they say the Nilo-Saharan, who is the Messiah, came down from the Nile, places like Sudan, Kush, and came in, and then the Bantu came. So when the Bantu came and the Nilo-Saharan Messiah, it's basically absorbed the Khoisan. So maybe some of them might have some Khoi blood in them, some of them basically, this is what happens when you're a small population, you become absorbed into, the popular society. So I'm asking them more questions now about, do you believe in God? So we said their God is called Engai, sometimes called Enkai. It's duality. So I'm trying to understand what he's saying duality, and I was able to figure out what he meant by duality. Basically, the forces of nature. So force of nature, it's the laws of opposites, it's almost like a yin and yang, so their God, in order for them to feel closer to their God, basically, Engai, it helps to either pray on a mountain or pray towards a mountain, either one. Now, they have many sacred mountains. You got Mount Kenya, you got Kilimanjaro, so there's many mountains, or even on a hill, sometimes even on a hill, so, and this is how you feel like you're close to God, because some people might pray in a church, a mosque, a synagogue, Buddhist temple, Hindu temple, and this is man-made building. So ain't nothing sacred of a man-made. God's creation, the mountains, most definitely the waters and everything that's natural. And that was easy for me to connect with those things because I'm about nature, most definitely. And nature and the creator is one and the same. It's not like it's completely everything separated. So they also told me about Egypt. So when you would explain about Egypt now, I've been to Egypt, yeah, and I'm happy I went to East Africa first because it helped me understand Egypt through sub-Saharan Africa, especially along the Nile River, biggest river in the world. So when they explained that, they used to go up and down, and even though they said they were from Sudan, like Kush, but they used to navigate up to Egypt, so probably during all the dynasties, probably even before the dynasties, the Nilo-Saharans would have been there. So now the Bantus also have this connection as well with ancient Egypt as well. And I'm going to take you to Egypt. We're going into Egypt now, because Egypt now, I was always wondering, like, at one time, who are the Egyptians, the same like I was saying about Morocco before. So when I looked at Egypt, and yeah, we're getting to visit the different temples, first went to the Valley of the Kings, and that was a spectacular place, absolutely amazing place. Also going into many different temples and going to visit the mummies also, and looking at some of the tombs, Ramses. Now, in the museums, they weren't allowing us to take pictures of the mummies. That's basically so you can't come back and show people they were black peoples, by the cranium, measure the cranium, some of the dreadlocks that I've seen. So there was undeniably a lot of black people. And I noticed that the more further you go back, the older of the skeletal remains or the mummies, you notice that the more African looking, then later on you get different people who've migrated into Egypt. So I was happy to visit the pyramids also in Cairo. That was like really spectacular. I didn't reach till the nighttime Cairo. Well, it's in Giza, actually. We got to Cairo, then we had to go to Giza. So when I was in the nighttime, we were in pyramid, like rooftop pyramid view. So when we're looking at the view, I'm spotting them firstly in the nighttime. When you're looking up in the nighttime and it's like a little few lit up and that, it's like, wow, what is this? It's like, it's just amazing. The three pyramids, the Great Pyramids, one so high and one a little bit smaller, then the other one a little bit smaller. And there's many other ones down here, but you can see three pyramids from where you are. So I was happy the next day when it was light to go there, see the pyramids, take many pictures. And getting to touch the pyramids was very important to feel like what they call limestone. And there's many stories on who built these great structures. And people come with all sorts of opinions. Some people say silly things like aliens. Some people just basically said slaves. And then some people said, no, people dealing with a high technology, advanced civilization. I can more believe that. Now, did they have some sort of certain type of knowledge that people just don't have now? With all the technology we have to this day, why can't they build the pyramids to this day? I believe there's a lot of distractions. There's not like things like all the distraction, the brainwashing that takes our mind away from our natural state. Also, they were very spiritual people. Now, maybe they had contact with higher dimensions. They were very spiritual people and believed some really deep things you'll find in their creation stories, most definitely. And also, a lot of things are documented, and oral history is definitely very important. But to really understand Egypt, I realized that you have to understand Greater Africa, the rest of Africa, the bottom of the Nile, the Bantu connection, Niger-Congo languages. This is why I'm happy I went to Kenya first. Along the time I went south of Egypt also, and I went to visit the Nubian village because it was very important that, especially in the work I do, I'm very interested in meeting indigenous original peoples of these lands as well. So when I went down to Aswan, these were the Nubians. These were black people, very dark-skinned people. I was very happy to meet them. So we had to get like a boat over to the Nubian village, and it's a spectacular view. And you can stay there if you want in the Nubian village, very cheap, you know. And in the Nubian village, I could see some people who were not Nubian. They were Arabs, pale Arabs, and they were trying to say they were Nubian, but I knew straight away that they wasn't. So I didn't buy off them. I basically just ignored them because I'm here to see the Nubians. So I got to see some Nubians there, which I'm really happy about. True black people, true African peoples, indigenous peoples. The Nubians, the Egyptians were basically one and the same. One and the same. Like almost European trying to make out like it was a separate place. It was not a separate place, you know, there was no borders and boundaries. These are all created by invaders that wanted to claim different territories. So going into Egypt was definitely a big experience there. And, you know, you can only see so many things and you can't see everything all in one, you know, so it was just great to visit the Nubians and actually see the remaining leftovers of black people in these lands, indigenous. Because when you go more north, the more paler they seem to become. Then you can see people with complexions like black Arabs as well. You can see pale Arabs. And also remember the Turks within these places as well. They made a big impact in that. And then the Turks are very pale people, as we know. So, yeah, so that's why I was happy I went to Kenya to really connect. You know, and like even like looking at the depictions in the tombs in the museums and seeing people with afros, people with dreads, people, you know, dark-skinned peoples, you know, and you can see that like they had a divine creator. They say Amen Ra, you know, Amen, you know, the hidden spirit, you know what I'm saying? This is like the great spirit. Ra, the sun, you know, you can say the sun god. Now Ra, they don't really explain too much. I spoke to an Egyptologist out there, and also he was a biologist. So I actually brought to his attention because they don't really speak too much on the baboon. The baboon, when it wakes up in the morning, it used to shout "rah," as they do. I brought this to his attention, and this is where they got the name Ra from. It wasn't just a man decided the sun. It's called Ra. This is the baboon when it rises, when the sun rises, you know, at the time in the morning. So when the sun comes out, they go, Ra, the baboon. So it's almost like you see that baboon praying to Ra, you know. So animals definitely played a big influence as well. You have to give, this is where nature is all working hand to hand together. Nothing is left out. Everything has its purpose. Everything is needed. You know, you might see the jackals, some with a jackal head. You might see the snake. You know, you might see, there's this many, the eagle, you know, saying. Also, cats were symbolic in ancient Egypt. I have a black cat myself, and, you know, they're actually considered as good luck, where over in the West, you might want to say they are bad luck. So, now, also, Zanzibar now as well. From Kenya, they went to Zanzibar. Now, Zanzibar was very interesting. It was interesting. It's part of Tanzania, East Africa. Now, there's a lot of history with Zanzibar. The first thing I'm going to mention is when did the first people get there? So we're dealing with probably 20,000 years ago, Africans would have sailed there by a boat, canoe, or however they got there. They didn't walk on water anyway. So we have been early navigators. And you can call that the Indian Ocean, but that's really the Ethiopian Ocean. You know, it's an African ocean. The Greeks were calling it the Ethiopian Ocean, you know. So what I noticed in Zanzibar, there's Maasai people again. I met some Maasais there, cattle herders, and interesting, and also meeting Bantu peoples again. I noticed obviously the Islamic country. I was aware of a lot of the slave trade as well. There's always slavery where there's Arabs and Europeans, Turks, so it just seems that like I said before, when the religion seems to come, slavery seems to be not far behind. And there's a part there in Zanzibar called, Stone Town. These go back to the history of slavery, where some of them were taken, mainly Bantus as well. I don't know why Bantus are always the target. Maybe it's the fact that we were the might in Africa, the strongest Africans, the biggest migration, agricultural farmers. They also had their own Iron Age. They had a matriarchal system. So the Bantus were a force to be reckoned with. So they took them into places like into different parts of North Africa. Also, some of them were sent to India to be enslaved. Some of them rose up, don't get me wrong, some of them rose up and became overseers in India. There's obviously times some Africans were taken into China, Iraq. In Iraq, you've got like the Zanj rebellion. These are Africans who rebelled from their slave masters, from the Turkish Arabs and them type of people. So these don't get talked about too much here, the Zanj rebellion, some of these actually went on from many different periods of time. Some people see it as the 3rd century AD up into like 8th and 9th century, these times. But these are some of the biggest rebellions that went on. Now, it's a beautiful place, Zanzibar, and I met some Africans there. I met a guy called Mo. He basically was a well-off person. He was just a normal person from the beginning. Then he moved to Canada, made a lot of money and spent his money back home very wisely. He had a foreign exchange. He had restaurants. He had about 10 different properties. A lot of them he rents out to people, tourism. And he was so down to earth. He wasn't flashy. And he was speaking to me about trying to get in to buy your own property, buy your land and build your house. And like I say, we deal with we're in debt forever to buy a house in the UK, or most parts of Europe or the Western world. It's the way it is. So that was interesting, meeting a man like that. And even though he was a Muslim, he still knew about his African roots. He was very clued up on great African civilization from the beginning of time. Very interesting. Whether he was aware of things like the Ashango bone, the oldest mathematical tool, which is found in the Congo, also the lumber bone. And these were early times of mathematics, Also, there was astrology, there was astronomy, there's many things that Africans invented and brought in. We had civilization in what we call sub-Saharan Africa, even before North Africa. Egypt just became the advanced light civilization, peaked. But before that, there were many civilizations in all of Africa. Egypt's actually the child of Africa. Now, dealing with another part of Africa now, we're going to deal with Namibia and South Africa. Now, Namibia was a very interesting place as well, Namibia. That was like spectacular place. Meeting Khoisan people and also Bantu people. So as we know that the Khoisan were the indigenous peoples there, then later on the Bantu people came, like they came from West Africa into places like Namibia, South Africa, and East Africa later. So a lot of people, it's Bantu. The Khoisan are a tiny minority now. They actually become a minority in most places that they are. I don't think they're the majority in any country in Africa, wherever they are. So like I say, I'm more connected to Bantu anyway, because I feel that these are the original Africans more so. When I say original Africans, we have Africans have different looks, different features, but it's easily, strongly for me to connect to the Bantu peoples, And then the Khoisan, their history is also interesting as well. They had civilization as well. These were great hunters. And to be able to survive in those hot Kalahari deserts, that is like, wow, you have to be tough. You have to be strong to survive in them and have the knowledge, the ancestral knowledge. Now, South Africa also, because of all the history in South Africa, the racism that's gone on there, so we just absolutely nuts. So what I noticed is there is colorism problem. So as we're speaking again, Bantu peoples, Khoisan peoples, and also mixed peoples who mix with the Dutch and the Africans who produced what they call mixed. We just say black people over in the UK. So I noticed that I was interviewing different peoples there. So I'm interviewing what they call a coloured mix, which is considered as a coloured. Now I can see how much they're divided. Like they'll believe that the indigenous Africans get treated better. They have more of the economy and it's unfair for them. Well, the way I described it to, listen, it's a case of get down or lay down. At the end of the day, whose side do you want to connect to? Do you want to connect to the indigenous Africans or do you want to connect to the invader? You have to make up your mind. Me, I'm connecting to the original Africans. That's very easy for me to say. Now, I was speaking to some Africans as well. They might have seen a little bit of a disconnection themselves, where they might have said, well, the coloureds, they were happy to be considered as coloureds to look that better, like back in, before the apartheid times and all that one. So to me, I just basically spoke to both of them and said, well, the main thing is who is at the top? Because some people are fighting for second place, but it's about first place. That's what it's really about. Not about second place, but the white man, European, he's put himself at the top and keeps everyone fighting at the bottom. Conquer and divides. That's how he takes land. Practices as ethnic cleansing wherever he goes. So I was happy to visit South Africa. I wasn't too eager many years ago to get there, but I was happy to get there. And, the oldest calendar comes from a place like South Africa as well. So South Africa had civilization a long time. And when we say South Africa, we have to really consider, you see, that's a country, South Africa. So when you're dealing with Southern Africa, that's which is a part of Southern Africa. So there's even like things like stories of some of the oldest people coming from around that region of South Africa. And some people say Congo, the Pygmies, the Twa, because the Twa, a lot of people don't give them credit. Because even like when I was in ancient Egypt, supposedly one of the oldest people there were the Twa, the small peoples. And I find these small peoples wherever I go, a lot of places around the world, they're either still there, living in isolated places, or they've been absorbed, and you will find traces of them from some of the earliest times. Like in Egypt, you have Bess, he's like a Twa, and these are before even the pyramids were built, before even the first dynasty of Egypt, before Name. So they don't get credit, a lot of the Pygmies. Now the Khoisan, they are the branch of the Pygmies. Some want to see the Khoisan as one of the oldest populations in the world, but it's very hard for me to recognize that. I see the Pygmy, the Twa, and I'm saying the Twa, not the Pygmy, because Pygmy is quite insulting, actually. So the Twa, I believe, are the oldest people, and they live in places like, they're in the Congo, they're in Cameroon, they're actually in some parts of Uganda, and they're even in some other parts of Africa in isolated places. So it's important that we give those credit to the small black peoples of the world. I see them all over in Asia. They're also in some parts of the Pacific, like the highlands of New Guinea, Papua New Guinea, in Southeast Asia. A lot of the small people are met, these are part of the first peoples to leave Africa, but they don't get no credit. So I have to give them all credit. So yeah, it's definitely interesting going different parts of Africa. Madagascar as well. Madagascar is an interesting place. Now, Madagascar, probably the largest island off the east coast of Africa. And it was an interesting place. I mean, I used to like watch Discovery Channel, watching basically the wildlife there, lemurs, all sorts of funny type of color lizards, and some unusual looking animals there. So it was great to be there. I landed in Antananarivo, overpacked city, a lot of poverty, of course, but at the same time, it was great to just be there. I was using a lot of Google Translate to speak to some of the Africans because a lot of them speak French. A lot of French-speaking people's there. Now, if I look back, I was looking at the history of Madagascar, and you get some scientists and these anthropologists, and they trying to work out who got to Madagascar first. Was it the Africans, or was it people from Austronesia? The Austronesian people who came basically from Indonesia, Borneo, during the time of when the Pacific Islanders were, they were starting their migration that came from Asia. So Madagascar, I'm looking at who are the oldest people myself, because I want to see some, I don't like when people just try and act like Africans weren't able to navigate the seas. I told you earlier, like we talking about Zanzibar. How did they get to Zanzibar 20,000 years ago? They had to come by boat. Simple as that. So navigating the seas, the ocean, the rivers, lakes, Africans were the first masters of that. So I was looking at like evidence of something about an elephant bird, right? And it's an extinct mammal. Now, it's about 10,500 years ago when the researchers were looking into this. And they knew by the slits in its throat that there had to be human occupation in those lands 10,500 years ago. So when they speaking about Austronesian people come maybe in the last 2,000 years, it doesn't mean nothing, because it's showing you that there were people there 10,500 years ago. And when they spoke about this elephant bird, they said that the eggs that they laid were so huge you could cook 50 omelets. And I was like, wow, that was amazing. So I was speaking to people from Madagascar from there. And yeah, you see different looks in Madagascar. Some very African-looking people. Some people look like Indonesians. And then some people look like the mixture of both, like some of them have mixed over the years and that. So it's quite a very interesting place, Madagascar. And then I went to the place called Moramenga. Moramenga was an interesting place. This is a totally different type of place. Very hilly down there, farm, like farm type of place. And yeah, we didn't have the best vehicle to get there as well. It was a very old car we were in. It was like just very bumpy, going down hills constantly. It was similar. Don't worry, I've done a lot of long journeys before now, but this is like very different. It wasn't a great vehicle, but just getting into there was really amazing. Got to meet some of the chiefs as well from different parts. We went to other parts, different areas on the way, and it's a huge island, so there's a lot of moving about you got to do to see Madagascar. So that was a really amazing place. Bantu seafarers also got there. Now, who got there before Bantus? Maybe other Africans got there in the earliest time, during 10,500 years ago, due to the elephant bird, thanks to the elephant bird having slits in its throat to show human occupation. So that writes up basically about the Austronesian being the first migration to Madagascar. Now, another place we deal with now. Now, some people don't want to classify this as Africa. Mauritius. Mauritius is a very beautiful place. It's an amazing place. It's geographically a part of Africa, an African island, just like Madagascar is. It's not far from Madagascar, but it's a very small island. Now, think of the name, first of all, Mauritius. Like we were talking about the Moors earlier, Mauritius, named after the Moors. Some people want to say it's named after this European guy with the second name, Mauritius, and all that one. That's a load of nonsense, because originally the first people to get to Mauritius were the Moors. This is what they don't really speak on too much. You can look deep into research and you'll find that even certain people from Europe in their accounts and their writings spoke about the Moors going there. So the Moors were masters of navigators of the seas. So that's very important. Now, when you go to Mauritius now, you see so many percent are African. Maybe, I don't know, we say 30%, maybe 35. Then there's a lot of Indians that were brought there, the indentured laborers, then time when you take it to places like East Africa, South Africa, Fiji Islands, Trinidad, Guyana, and, taking these places. So they become the majority. They are the majority there. And you can see that they have been placed above the black people, basically, but the white man always keep himself at the top. That's always the way. Now, Hinduism, that kind of dominates, and Hinduism is a very racist religion. It just don't work for anybody black, especially the darker you are. So anyone dark-skinned who's a Hindu should just leave it because it's no benefit to them, So Mauritius, yeah, absolutely amazing place. Now, even before the times of Indians being sent there, or people from Africa being brought as slaves by the Europeans, the times when other Africans reached these places as well. Yet Moors is just one part of them, but there was other Africans that were able to reach these places. So they always try to write off Africans all the time. That's what they do, write it off all the time. And this is where this colorism comes in all the time as well, where the darker you are, the worse you're treated, and the lighter you are, the more that, you're benefiting. So this happens within the Indian caste system anyway, so that's what it is. Now, Cape Verde, I spoke a little bit about Cape Verde last time. And I went to the museums there because we always got told that the Portuguese visited these places and there was nobody there until they brought slaves. The many free Africans, just like I said before, Africans were masters of the seas. Senegalese fishermen were able to reach these places. It was it's not far. Another thing is as well, Cape Verde was also a place which was a stop off and a current that will take you into the Americas. I'll take you into the Americas. So that's very important to deal with Cape Verde. Now, you got people there who are mixed with Portuguese and African, and they speak Portuguese. And then you got some people who are African, full African there. And you can see the Portuguese influence. Like when I was out there, I went to into the desert to do astronomy, getting the telescopes out, looking at the stars, and he's explaining so much knowledge. Another brother actually called Laman as well. He was our teacher for the day. And it's quite a popular name, that Laman. I noticed a man called Laman in Gambia when he was taking us on the tours. So that was interesting, and just going to visit some of the different places, and very peaceful people. One thing they say is no stress, and I definitely relate to that. No stress, because stress is the biggest killer, especially in the Western world, suicidal, So yeah, so it's just amazing to visit Africa and all different parts of Africa, and learn about many different African civilizations that predate all these peoples on the planet. Me, myself, as a Nigerian, and I'm waiting to get to Nigeria. It's been a long time. I've got to get there myself. They are the Nok culture, some say 1500 BC, but the site goes back to about maybe 4000 BC. So we're giving these dates anyway. We're always giving these dates to shorten our civilization down. They want Europeans, because they have the civilization late, to try and match it up with theirs, or even put it back behind theirs, or they deal with things like Sumeria was the oldest civilization. Now, the Sumerians were Africans anyway that came into these areas. Kushites, Niger-Congo peoples. So Africans have always moved around Africa. You've also left Africa to go into different parts of the world, brought civilization to Sumer, brought into places like Persia. So in Sumer, Then you got a group of people called the Elamites in Persia. So then you've got the Indus Valley civilization, which Africans brought in. Then you've got the Shang Dynasty, Shia Dynasty in China. Later on, you have the Japanese. They have civilizations. Also, the German people. The German people were the indigenous peoples of Japan, black peoples, you know. So, but Africans have always spread. Then there's later times that not only did we bring our civilization around the world, like the Olmecs in Mexico, you know, Africans going into the Pacific Islands. So, but we need to be the writers of our history. This is why I decided to always get out there and meet these indigenous peoples. And like I say, I always give that big thanks to my grandmaster teacher, Dr. Renaud Rashidi, because he was meant to be a part of the journey that I was on. So the journey was basically, I like to travel from the beginning. I had globes, I had maps, and I always had a vision from young that I'll be visiting a lot of places around the world. And also, you know, these are just inspirations. Sometimes when you look at the globe, you're able to form ideas and, you know, and live my dream. That was basically what it is. And I didn't know I was going to be a researcher as I got older, but I knew I'd like to travel. And I was visiting, you know, different peoples and that. And then, like I say, Dr. Renaud Rashidi, he basically showed me indigenous peoples to many different places, black peoples. And I was very, like, surprised. I knew about, like, don't get me wrong, I was quite, like, I was onto some things, like looking at some people in the Pacific Island. I knew they were like black peoples and that, but I didn't know actually the Fijian people say they come from Africa and, you know, Lake Tanganyika, which is Tanzania. So I was very surprised about that. So big thanks to Dr. Renaud Rashidi, you know, the grandmaster teacher. And I give a big thanks to many of the other teachers who I came across as well. And like Dr. Yoshi Ben Yakinen, he was absolutely an amazing teacher. And the amount of places he's been to as well, you have to give Dr. Ben a lot of props as well, you know. Sheikh Anta Diop, you know, all the challenges that these people faced. He faced many challenges just to prove to us, you know, even though he was from Senegal, he was going to France, and the racism, what they would suffer a long time ago. And the Cairo, you know, in the Cairo conference in the 70s, where him and Philo Pabenga, the two Africans, had to prove that the ancient Egyptians were black peoples. So it's just interesting, and it's amazing that, like, some of the scholars and the works that they put in. And then obviously people like Dr. John Hendrik Clark, you know, Ivan van Sertima. Yes, J. Rogers is another very important researcher as well. You know, another researcher, Wayne Chandler. You know, there's a lot of people who basically contributed. Then there's people there who, you know, other races who kind of contributed, because sometimes we've had to look at some of the works of ancient Greek writers as well, who were honest about things. Like, when I say honest, basically, when they would come into Africa to learn, they had to write down everything that they see, everything that would benefit. It was like almost like a spy, but at the same time, it benefited us in the long run by their writings. Even saying about Africa, India was Eastern Ethiopia, which was very interesting in Herodotus's writings, and also people like Diodorus. You know, these are very important works. Chancellor Williams was definitely a big researcher for me as well. I went through his book, The Destruction of the Black Civilization from 4500 BC to 2000 AD. This man lived to 99. This was an amazing scholar. Did the field work, and I'm feeling his experience and connecting to it when he's speaking about, you know, he's from the United States. And all he was learning when he was growing up, just like anybody else, was that you had no history. So he decided to basically be so passionate about his history. And his father was a freed slave. So his ambition into doing what he did was not taken for granted at all. So when he's going to places like South Africa, they were very surprised back in his time that a black researcher was coming to do research in South Africa, especially during all these times. Also, we wanted to go into South Sudan and North Sudan. They said, you can come into North Sudan, but you can't come into South Sudan. So he wanted to go more into South Sudan because of they were black people still to this day. Yeah, there's North Sudan, still black people. Obviously, there's people, black Arabs and Arabs, but he wanted to go where the purest Africans were, so, and, we have to give big thanks to these people, what they had to go through to pave the way for the younger people coming through. And like these people always says, they will always be, hopefully we get the new researchers coming up. And when these new researchers come up, that's when things are going to really take off. New research is coming out every day. I try to follow anything new, anything that I can find from different places. Look how many different civilizations Africa had. Malian Empire, very important empire. Timbuktu, the Dogon people. The Dogon people actually so amazing, the astronomical knowledge that they had. So big credit to the Dogon people, massive credit to them. And they have stories, just like other Africans have stories about coming from ancient Kemet. So Africans have always moved around Africa. There's no boundaries and borders. You can't come here and you can't go there. So let's not deal with European version of his story. We're dealing with the African story today. And I'm proud to be African. I wouldn't be anything else but an African. And I've been nurtured from a child. I have an African surname. And I don't continue this life. I don't continue research, continue traveling, and bringing knowledge back to people in the UK or wherever we are, Liverpool. Like I say, it's about because basically we just deal with a lot of things negative, the slave trade, and we get taught about the slave trade from children. As soon as you put the TV on as a kid, like I mentioned, watching Roots, and this is what you're getting. But I was happy that I went out and decided to start doing a lot of research myself, started reading many different books, many different journals. I was researching I've done it a long time now. And it's one thing where I don't think I can name a day in the last 15 years or more that I haven't looked at African history every day. And if it's not African history, it'd be original peoples wherever we are on this planet. Every day. There's even times when I've been even in work environments, and every minute I get, I'm researching, I'm saying on my phone or whatever. So there's no time for me to rest, every day I've got to get stuck in, because there's not 1 second on this planet where white supremacy is not trying to oppress you in some sort of way. Whether he's sitting there plotting or it's happening every day, So the least I can do is do my research for at least 7 hours a day. There's been times where I was even researching even more than what I do now. Sometimes it's like 15 hours a day. And I've had to sacrifice watching things like movies. I've had to sacrifice many things. I don't go on nights out. I keep in certain circles as well. So I'm about just digging and digging and digging and digging. And I believe that my purpose on this planet, I am trying to fulfill. I've realized what is important and what's not important in life, and each to their own. But I'm happy I'm able to bring back some information which is very authentic and very different than what the usual teachers of Black history is. And just dealing with Black history, and you look at the name Black history, with the Europeans came with the name Black. This is why I came back with original peoples, because as original peoples, we are indigenous to the whole planet, but Africa being the birthplace. And we need to know our geographical area, our place of belonging is very important. The place of belonging, which part of Africa you're from. This is very important, because We have the Caribbean, we have Americans, and they might just see Africa as like, well, we from all over Africa, but it does help when you know the geographical area you're from and your tribe. I'm not a person who bases things only on tribalism. No, basically. I see it as bigger than tribes. That's just the geographical area of where you're from. And sometimes in these countries, it does help when you tell them your tribe, and then they know where you're from. Oh, you're from down there. You know, African spirituality is something that I've always connected to from a long time, especially where I've always been a person who's been a deep thinker, always in deep thought, deal with nature. And it was very easy for me to connect to African spirituality, more than it's easy for me to connect to any religion, because I feel like there's a bunch of set of rules with religion. Now, African spirituality, it's so natural. Everything is very natural. It's not hard for me to understand it. It's very easy. You know, everything is based on nature, the laws of nature. So there's no arguments with the laws of nature. And that's very important. So dealing with the motherland, Africa, there's many more other African countries I do plan to visit in the future. I'm going to put like Congo on the list, most definitely. I'd love to meet the pygmies, or well, the Twad, as we say. I'd love to go to Cameroon. I definitely got to go to Nigeria. That's going to be very soon when I get a Nigerian passport. So I'm not going there with a visa, you know. So Senegal will be going, you know. I could have went there when I was in Gambia, but I was just about Gambia at that time. Also, other places like Zimbabwe, that's another place I plan to go. Zambia, Chad, Sudan, Ethiopia, most definitely. Got to get to Ethiopia. So now North Africa, been to Egypt and Morocco, but I would like to go to some of these other North African countries, but I'm not really into going places where it's a total Arab eyes take over or European eyes take over, and it just destroys your comforts. Yeah, I could also like to go to Mauritania. Now, Mauritania is another place where slavery, because people like dealing with slavery and talking about slavery, 1981, slavery became abolished in 1981. Wow. When I researched about that, I knew how serious the destruction of African people was. 1981. Unbelievable. So now also there's still oppression happening to Africans, whether it's from the Europeans or whether it's from Arabs or Turks, or, you know, there's always someone interfering with our lives. And people like to believe that they're better than Africans. But the very important thing that we must do is stay proud, keep researching, pass down the knowledge to the youth. And that's very important, as in ancient Africans always had oral history. And there's still parts of Africa where they do still pass on oral history. It's not just about writing things down. It's about, like, you know, tapping into the memory, tap into that memory bank, because writing can be destroyed. You know, just like everything can be destroyed. So passing down your oral history, your traditions, your culture, your spirituality, you know, and language is a very important thing. This is why I'm deciding soon to learn a Yoruba, going for the Yoruba language, because that's more widely spoken in Nigeria. Plus, as well, in Haiti, they speak Yoruba. Part of Trinidad, they speak Yoruba. Also in Brazil, there's Yoruba speakers. So Yoruba definitely is going to be the language for me. And there's other languages what some people gravitate toward, like Swahili. Now, Swahili, some say it's a mixed language between African and Arabic. Now, some people don't see it as that. Some people see it as a pure African languages. But I think I'm more confident with the Yoruba being a pure African language. So most definitely, that's it. Because when you call on God, it's nice to call on God in your own language. So, and the forces of nature always connecting to Ifa, you know what I'm saying? So we call on like Shango, the god of thunder, the Orishas, Shango, the god of thunder, the courage to change yourself, because it's sometimes change in life to become a better person or to have the courage to do something. I'm calling on Shango, god of thunder, so. And then there's many other Orishas, and sometimes in life they say you need to find out your Orisha. And initiation, that's been something that's gone on for a long time. Some people are afraid to get initiated into a spiritual system, but obviously there's ways to initiate yourself. This is one thing that's very important, and I believe I have initiated myself, so I don't need to give money away. Sometimes a lot of things have become a con game now, where people are trying to make money, and we must be on point. We have to be on point now. So anyway, it's been a great discussion today, speaking on Africa, the motherland, the Holy Land, the first people, the first civilized people on this planet that gave and paved the way for the rest of the world. So all that nonsense about Africa didn't have this, or they didn't have that. 2 words for you. You fools. Definitely. Use fools. That's all I can say. So it's been great today. Great discussion. And normally I'm interviewing, I'm a podcaster. I've interviewed many different people, starting off the Discovering Show, season 1. Used to do this with Chase Johnson Lynch, give me the start on interviewing in a studio, which I was very privileged to. I did 5 seasons. I had many different guests on there, Pan-African guests, historians, musicians, DJs, all sorts of different people from religious background, Nation of Islam, people who went AWOL from the army, so we've got many different people, vegans, people who've done Reiki, we've had like models on there, also different areas like ancestral voices, for example, dealing with deep into the spirituality. Tao Haranuba, very interesting brother, grandmaster teacher. Yeah, this is it. The importance of African history is one of the main questions I probably asked nearly everybody who's came on the show, because I felt that I don't want to keep it on air, this negative slave trade stuff all the time, even though we know it exists, it was there. But the word slave don't start with African people. Europeans used to slave their own, because they didn't have no resources to trade. They would trade slaves, their own people. Some slaves, white slaves, were coming into Africa, and they benefited coming into Africa, because you got to look at, you understand about slavery, indentured labor, but then you can understand things like prisoners of war. Now, sometimes the prisoners of war, like the people in the Malian Empire who were benefited, so some of these people who they call these white slaves that were coming into Africa, they had a better life than when they were slaves in Europe by their own people, because there was famine, there was savage behavior, just brutal killings, just for nothing, so it actually benefited those pale people coming into Africa. That was like paradise to them. Please take me into slavery in Africa. Oh yeah, you will definitely benefit a lot more, because Africans have the true spirit. And basically, you come to do labor. I wouldn't call it slavery. You come to do labor, and you're going to benefit, and you'll be granted stuff in the end. So that's just all I'd like to say today, anyway. And this is season 1, episode 1, dealing with Africa. Next time we're coming into Asia next on part 2. So I want to thank you very much anyway for today. This is James Diboe on Discovering, dedicated to original peoples as always. And you know what? There's more to come. There's more to come on this topic, but thank you very much. And we out of here. Peace and blessings and Black power, melanated powers, original peoples, wherever we go on this planet. One love, peace.